Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Friday, February 12th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to do a weekly wrap-up because this was a pretty busy week with the second impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump. A lot of news really from a fiscal and monetary standpoint too, because I really think it was something that you just never hear from a chair of the Federal Reserve. Criticizing, if you will, and just flat out saying that the unemployment rate, the official unemployment rate of 6.3%, it's not right. The real unemployment rate, he states, is closer to 10%. Now, we did a podcast on that. I mentioned it yesterday, and I'm mentioning it again today because I need to stress what this means. They are setting the stage to spend, borrow, and print like we never have before. You thought 2020 was crazy. Buckle up. We haven't seen anything yet. Janet Yellen is talking about full employment end of next year as soon as possible, but we have to pass the $1.9 trillion monstrosity, which included in it is a $15 minimum wage. According to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, 1.4 million jobs will be lost as a result of that policy. And I can assure you it will be higher than that. These people are trying to be ridiculously stupid. I mean, because they're achieving it. That has to be their goal, is to prove their ignorance and their stupidity. They have to be. This has to be their goal, and they are succeeding. And it's going to be the people who pay the ultimate price, and it's going to be extremely costly. It appears that there's also an additional round of bailouts to the tune of $14 billion that is going to be going to the airline industry. Now, I've lost track, but we have to be close to about $80 to $100 billion since COVID-19, since Nobody Cares Act 1.0, and all these other little things that they've been passing to assist, to bail out the airline industry. Because we continue to see tens of thousands of employees within that industry on furlough. And if they don't get a little bit more money, well, then they're going to have to go and cut their jobs altogether. They are now unemployed. They are now without work. They're not going to be called back, at least not anytime soon. So the industry has played Congress and the taxpayer like a fiddle. Just say, oh, well, do you want to lose more jobs? No, of course not. So here, just whatever we need. And don't forget that it was the airline industry, in conjunction with many, many others, but the airline industry was definitely a major player when it came to financially engineering their stock prices via share buybacks. Don't forget that. Okay? They had the cash. They went out to corporate bond market. They raised debt. They had their operational cash flows coming in. And they said, screw it, we're not going to shore up our balance sheet. Why do that? Why actually have a good financial statement when we, as the members of the board, the executive suite, we can just financially engineer our stock price? Our compensation is tied to the performance of the share price? Boom, presto, no problem. Well, then we did have a problem, didn't we? And they didn't have a rainy day fund, which was same song and dance for many other companies, many other industries across the board. This is a direct result of the financialization of our country. This is a direct result of what we have been doing since the great financial crisis, quantitative easing. It pushes us further out onto the risk curve. It has generated zombie corporation after zombie corporation. It sustains zombies. This is completely unsustainable. It's complete, and it's going to prove to be completely devastating. And the price tag just keeps going up and up and up. A decade ago during the started, wait until some $100 billion there. We throw these numbers around like it's nothing. Because $500 billion doesn't buy you what it used to. That's called inflation. But of course, we're told that doesn't exist. The TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program during the Great Financial Crisis, $800 billion, right? Had to be a big number. Had to be a big number. They didn't want to throw around the T word then. They didn't want to say trillion because that just would have been crazy back then. But today, we say 1.9 trillion like it's nothing. We threw a few $1 trillion into Nobody Cares Act 1.0 like it was nothing. We passed $900 billion 2.0 back in December. 1.4 trillion in spending last December too. No problem. CBO's projecting $2.3 trillion deficit this fiscal year alone, and that takes into consideration nothing else. Just continuing on course. Doesn't take into consideration the 1.9 trillion and anything else that the Biden administration and Congress are going to get through. Whether it's in a bipartisan manner or whether it's Chuck Schumer and the Democrats pushing it through budget reconciliation. We are just getting started. Federal Reserve knows that they are trapped. The Treasury Department knows that they are trapped. And so the best thing they can do is just dig deeper. Because they figure, well, we can't dig our way out of this, so to speak, so we'll just keep digging deeper and hope that something happens, and we'll just blame it on somebody or something else. And that's exactly what they're doing. Because Jay Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, these people never come out and basically disqualify a government statistic. They live off of government statistics. But they need to set the stage. They need to start planting the seed for the narrative as to what their goal is now. They're always moving the goalpost because they can never make it. So they always have to move it. Price stability and full employment is the dual mandate of the Fed. Okay? Well, they've struck out on both of them because inflation is up and it's going through the roof. It will be, make no mistake about it. And we are nowhere near full employment. And the way that we achieved full employment before COVID-19 was at the expense of trillion-dollar deficits. So completely unsustainable. So they fail every time they go up to bat. But if they can print enough money to juice financial assets, well, then I guess everything's A-okay. It doesn't matter at what expense. As long as people's portfolios are going up and the music keeps playing, then presumably everybody's happy, although I don't believe that to be the case. I unfortunately think a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people are depressed, frustrated, desperate. We have U.S. consumer sentiment at a 6-month low. The University of Michigan's consumer sentiment for the U.S. fell to 76.2 in February, down from a reading of 79 in January, which is well below market expectations of a reading of 80.8. So we got 76.2. Market was expecting 80.8. It is the lowest reading since August. Expectations slipped with the entire loss concentrated among households with incomes below $75,000. Current conditions also declined, and inflation expectations for the year ahead increased. Well, what a surprise. You think the people in the real economy understand what's already going on and what is coming? Absolutely. Absolutely they do, which is why it disgusts me anytime I hear a financial analyst or an economist go on TV and talk about deflation. Yeah, well, there might be prices dropping in some products and services, but that's because nobody wants them, because nobody needs them. What about energy? What about food? What about housing? All going up. I mean, the commodity boom, I'm going to have to do a video so you can see the charts and graphs on just a basket of commodities. They keep going up. Now, this could be a decade. Bull will be the next super cycle for commodities, which, if that's the case, you're talking basically a bull market in the commodity space for the next 20 to 30 years, basically a generation. That's the super cycle when it comes to commodities. That could very well be underway right now. Most of it right now driven by monetary and fiscal policy. Completely fake, completely smoke and mirrors. But the money that they're throwing into the system, it's there. It has to find its way somewhere. And I believe it's going to find its way into precious metals and commodities. The real stuff. tangible things, something you can handle, you can put it in your pocket, something that you need to keep the lights on, to turn the lights on, something you need to survive, food. The whole basket is going to keep going up. And then behind it too, eventually there will be true organic growth. Population is growing. Depending on what part of the globe you're talking about, there's very strong demographics, a lot of young people. But there is a huge hurdle to get over before we start to see that organic growth take stride and for it to be sustainable for a good period of time. Because if inflation really takes root, which it's going to, and you start to see a lot of the basic cost of living continue to increase, again, your food, your housing, your energy, your utility bill, continuing to go up, but you don't have true economic production continuing to go higher, that's a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for economic, political, and societal collapse. And that's where we are. And I think 2021 is going to be an extremely rude awakening. We started to see and feel the foreshocks of this coming back in 2019 with one protest and riot after the next. Obviously, some of that simmered down in 2020 due to COVID-19 and the various restrictions. But we're already seeing coups and a continuation of protests, even if they're weekend warriors, around the globe. And a lot of this does not get the attention that it deserves, especially not in this country, because God forbid Americans are actually educated and informed on what's taking place outside of our borders. Because we can't have this. We can't have people waking up. We can't have people with original thoughts saying, yeah, that's how they're being treated over in Argentina, in Ecuador, and the Philippines, in Myanmar, in Russia. You mean that's how those people are being treated too? That's how we're being treated like that in the United States. And those people with nothing have the nerve to go up against their government? Well, what's going on? Can't have an independent thought here in this country. Can't do it. Not if you're watching the mainstream media, cable news. No. Can't do it. You got to read page 30 within the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal to get a good sense of what's going on anywhere else. Wake up, people. This stuff is just getting started. And don't forget, we were told last year, United Nations, IMF, World Bank, other organizations, that there is going to be a famine this year that's likely going to affect hundreds of millions of people. Okay, so what do you think the direct result of that is going to be? They're just going to sit there and take it. They can't eat. Their children are starving to death. Revolutions are fought on empty stomachs. So it's coming. Just a question of when. I imagine a lot of it is going to really start taking root this year, unless somehow through other variants of COVID-19 that they scare the hell out of everybody again, and they can put these lockdowns and restrictions on and people remain compliant with them, which I don't think will happen this time around because too many businesses have been lost, too many lives have been upended. Like I just stated with the U.S. consumer sentiment at a 6-month low, most definitely impacting those below an income of $75,000. These people are hurting. And most of these people have gotten a break. They have rent and mortgage moratoriums. They have student loan moratoriums, and they still are struggling. We talked about that earlier this week. No savings, no problem. Of course, that was a question, but we know it's a problem. Check out that podcast. Survey that was conducted last summer, which I thought was good. I thought it was timely, which is why we discussed it earlier this week. Just to get a sense, start to put a benchmark. So when we have other surveys and other data points come out that talk about the same thing, we at least know where we're trending. Things getting better, they getting worse, they stagnating. What's the question? Okay, what's the scenario? So check that podcast out, No Savings, No Problem. And of course, many families are in dire straits. Half the country doesn't have retirement savings. The median savings account balance is $3,500. It's really not that much. So they're going to try to push again more checks in the $1.9 trillion monstrosity age, which, a lot of people will be thankful for until they realize that they just got themselves cut out of a job. Because that's what's going to happen. Because a lot of businesses just simply cannot support that type of wage for a minimum wage job. Minimum wage means low skill. It's not, most of these businesses are small businesses. You know these people. It's not like these are the evil, greedy capitalists that everybody thinks that exist out there. These are your small businesses. These are your next door neighbors. These are the people that coach t-ball and little softball. These are the people that want to give these kids, once they're of age, a job. Learn some responsibility. Gain a skill. Be responsible. Wake up early. Be on time. Take orders from a boss. How to deal with colleagues. How to deal with customers. That's all important stuff. You can use that as experience because it is experience. Take that experience to another job. Say, look, I had a job. This is what I've learned. Okay, well, now you're no longer worth minimum wage. Now you're worth more because you have the experience. That's how it's supposed to work. There shouldn't even be a minimum wage. Now, the $15 isn't going to affect much when it comes to New York or California. But imagine if you're somebody in the Midwest or in the Deep South. That's going to crush them. $15 an hour. I mean, that's $30,000 plus a year, just in salary alone, if they're full-time, and all the other additional costs tacked on to having employees. Well, if you're going to spend $30,000, why not invest in a touchscreen monitor if you're a fast food joint, as opposed to having a kid stand up there and, may I take your order? Just touch the screen, order it up, and one kid in the back will put it together. This is what's going to happen. People are going to lose their jobs. Opportunities are going to be stolen. And we're already doing a spectacular job of doing that with the debts and deficits that we're running now. Just completely robbing blind future prosperity for current generations and those yet to exist. Completely unsustainable. You know, you fast forward to where we're going to be in 4 years, we're nearly at $50 trillion on a national debt basis. $50 trillion. GDP is only going to grow by a few trillion. Basically 7-to-1 ratio of debt to growth. How stupid can you be? Again, they are evidently trying to prove their stupidity. That has to be the goal. Has to be. And they are succeeding. And we will be the ones paying for it. Initial jobless claims, as we discussed yesterday, 793,000, another heartbreaking and devastating figure, which fits very well into the narrative that the Fed and Treasury Department are starting to weave. Because this number is not getting better. The prior weeks was revised upward by 33,000, and now I think, if memory serves me from yesterday, it was 812,000. So we thought last week we got below 800,000 only for the revision to come in and say, oh, no, we were once again north of 800,000. And now we're flirting with it again at 793. So I imagine with another upward revision, we'll be north of 800,000 with that revision. I hope that's not the case, but it probably will be. Grand total of everybody collecting some form of unemployment insurance is over 20 million once again. And if you do the math on that, that gives us a de facto unemployment rate of 14.3%. Not the 6.3% that the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us, and not even the 10% that Jay Powell tells us that's really what the number is closer to. No, it's closer to 14%, and I bet it's even higher than that. So you got all that to deal with. I told you this was a busy week, and more is coming. Now, we also got news out of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, that they have been authorized by the G7 countries, obviously the largest economies on the planet, and members of the IMF. They are authorizing $500 billion worth of SDRs, special drawing rights, which is basically the currency of the International Monetary Fund, which is just a basket of currencies. It's ridiculous what these people are doing, but it's $500 billion that's being authorized, and that is to, as they say, assist and or bail out some of the low and middle income countries that are out there that are struggling and are in desperate need of some form of assistance. So another $500 billion out of nowhere is going to be making its way through the system. This is complete destruction. This is the greatest depression. This is not just a recession. This is the greatest depression. We talk about making comparisons about what we're going through today with the great financial crisis, which was the worst economic and financial crisis in generations, really, that the world has ever seen. And we are blowing past a lot of those numbers. That's how devastating and destructive this has been, and will continue to be. And as I always like to stress here, we are still dealing with the effects of the GFC. That's why Donald Trump came to power. Because Obama and his administration, he was not the golden boy. Everybody was hopeful. Hope and change, hope and change. Not much experience. We like his policies. Country's going down the tubes. Maybe this guy can turn it around. Nope. Same policies, kept everything going. Kept everything going. If everything was fantastic, Hillary Clinton would have been the president. Didn't happen. It's very easy to make these connections. This is what happens when you have a country and a society that is in decline and decay. These are the people you turn to. Not too much experience. Doesn't really know what he's doing. But yeah, let's give him a shot. Let's give him a shot. Doesn't even really have much principle or not too much on philosophy. But let's give him a shot. Didn't work out. Surprise, surprise. Gives rise to Donald Trump. No experience. Not really that good of a businessman, but taps in to the decline and the decay. Taps into the depression, the despair, the frustration. He gets it. Understands it. The forgotten men and women in this country, and there are millions of them, and it transcends red or blue. It transcends Republican or Democrat. Oh, this guy hears me. He's giving me voice because he tapped into it. He tapped in to that populist rhetoric. And it became a very emotional attachment. That's why he says he can shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and his base will stay with him. That's true. That's true because it is an emotional connection. People feel so forgotten, so abused, feel like they have just been left out of the system, which they have been, because this is how this system operates, and finally somebody is giving them voice, or so they believed. That's why he came to power. Donald Trump, as I always say here, he is not the disease. Whether you love him or hate him, he is not the disease. He is a symptom of a country, of a society that is in decline. Period. End of story. He is not the first person to have a populist message to rise to power. People are hopeful that he's going to be able to turn things around. Didn't do it. Sadly, he didn't do it. Up against a lot, but also doesn't have a philosophy. Donald Trump doesn't have a philosophy. He's not a Paul. He's an opportunist. He's a salesman. His philosophy is to win at all and any cost. If I have to lie, if I have to cheat, if I have to steal, if I have to bribe, doesn't care. It's all about Trump, Trump, Trump. That should be perfectly evident by now if it wasn't beforehand. And he's being impeached for the second time. Impeachment, obviously, is something that should be done very rarely, if ever, but it is in the Constitution because you have to have a means of holding people to account. You have the impeachment, you have the trial, you have the vote to convict or to acquit, to remove from office, to disqualify from holding office in the future for federal positions. It's in the Constitution. It's there for a reason. And I think that Donald Trump needs to be held to account for his actions and for his rhetoric, especially during the 2020 election and what took place in our nation's capital on January 6th. To hold him to account and to hold future presidents to account. It's not just about Trump. It's about future presidents. That you cannot behave like this. Because I'm telling you, when you are a society in decline like we are, and so many others around the globe are, Donald Trump is the appetizer for who's going to come down the pike, who's going to tap into populist rhetoric, and who's going to have a little bit of skill in getting some things done and can be really more destructive. Okay? This isn't me just theorizing about this. This is human history. Study Eastern Europe. Study communist leaders, socialist leaders, study Latin America. This stuff happens time and time again because people are desperate. Somebody taps in to that feeling. People are hopeful that that person is the golden boy, is the savior. 9.9 out of 10 times, not the case. And you end up with a bigger problem. And unfortunately, that's what we have. That's what we have. So a message has to be sent that this type of rhetoric, these types of actions cannot be tolerated. Now, we can argue about the process. Donald Trump's defense team obviously stood up today and had their defense. A lot shorter than the House impeachment officers or managers, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to have an extensive presentation for a defense. Sometimes brevity is better. You can argue process, that's completely fine. Not a very extensive investigation, not much of one at all. That's relevant. No witnesses were brought forward. That's relevant too. You can make these arguments. But it's pretty hard to defend Donald Trump just based off of the facts. Every senator in there was a witness on that day. They were there. They know how they felt. They know how their colleagues felt. Now, whether they were aware of all of the shenanigans going on, well, that's obviously a situation in chaos. You're not going to be fully aware of everything. So they were informed via the presentation of the House managers, House impeachment managers, of how close they may have been to getting caught by some of these people who meant business. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts that some people who breached the Capitol were, if they got their hands on somebody, were going to do some harm to them. Others were just walking around following the crowd, this, that, and the other. I'm not somebody who does the blanket and calls all of these people rioters or domestic terrorists, because they weren't. Most of those people there were peaceful, and they were protesting, which is their constitutional right. They were there for the right reasons. Well, they were there, I should say, protesting peacefully. Put it that way. But that's not how the media is going to play it up. That's not how a lot of the Democrats are going to play it up, calling them all domestic terrorists, calling them all rioters, which is completely wrong. And they want to talk about unity. That's only going to further divide the country, which it has. The whole thing is, and that's why I am trying to tell you, you have to rise above the two-party system. None of these, you do not owe your allegiance or your respect to any one of these people. Not one. Not one. This isn't me picking on Donald Trump. Donald Trump just happens to be the guy that was in there. If this was Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, you'd be hearing the same thing. I hope this audience understands that. This isn't a personal animus against Donald Trump. He was just the character, wrong place, wrong time, didn't do the right thing. And he needs to be held to account. We're going to talk about a two-tier justice system. He's likely going to be acquitted. A woman got shot in the neck and is dead. Okay? But all those other people that were in there, they're all going to have to face the music. They're going to have hefty legal fees. A lot of them are going to go bankrupt. A lot of them are already in financial dire straits as it is. So again, if you got power, you got connections, you walk away scot-free, you're the little guy, you're getting screwed. Is that what we're supposed to stand for in this country? I don't think so. This is so easy. So easy for the Republicans to put this guy to rest, to say, you can't hold office anymore. See you later. I mean, hell, even from a political standpoint, just make a deal with the Democrats. Yeah, we'll kick this buffoon out. We'll disqualify him from holding office again, but you have to work with us on policy XYZ. It's not just going to be running the bases with reconciliation or what have you. You're going to have to meet us halfway somewhere. Come on, do something, for God's sake. Make a deal. I mean, I don't know, but then you have these people talking, Republicans, and even his defense team talking about, well, this isn't how it's done. You hold them to account criminally. Is that what they want to do? They're going to go after Trump criminally after the fact? Is that the argument that they're making? I mean, you still have the DAs up in New York going after him. You might have the DA within Washington, D.C. go after him. You might have the state's attorney general down in Georgia go after him. Well, who knows? I mean, we're far from out of the woods with them, so just put him to bed. Put him to bed. Send him to Florida where he is. Let him go to the spa. Let him go golfing. See you later. See you later. Do you really want more of this? Is this the best we can do? You're complaining about how old Joe Biden's going to be. Well, that's how old Trump will be in another 4 years. So I just don't understand the argument to support and defend this guy. I just don't at all. Got to hold people to account. you have any respect and reverence for the Founding Fathers, you have to understand why that is. It's probably because you understand that they were great students of history. And because they were great students of history, it meant they were great students of human behavior. They understood the rise and fall of empires, and they understood how people, how governments, and how people in power behave at different points along that rise and fall of empires. That's why there are remedies within the Constitution for impeachment, for removal, for disqualification. It's quite simple. It's quite simple. People in allegiance, they do not care about you. I have 50 trillion reasons. I have 50 trillion pieces of evidence. What do you got? Enjoy your weekend. Happy Valentine's Day. I'll catch you next week. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.